We begin this morning with the U.S. House of Representatives ousting of Republican Kevin McCarthy from his post of Speaker.
On this vote, the yeas are 216, the nays are 210. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The office of Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives is hereby declared vacant.
It is the first time in history that a sitting Speaker has been removed. His replacement is not yet known, but Patrick McHenry has been named to step in as temporary Speaker. The vote was called by a member of McCarthy's own party, Matt Gaetz, from Florida, after he accused the Republican Party leader of not doing enough to cut federal spending. The vote comes just days after Congress narrowly averted a government shutdown. Gaetz was one of a dozen Republicans who repeatedly voted against McCarthy's bid for Speaker in January.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 2A1 of Rule 9, I rise to give notice of my intent to raise a question of the privileges of the House. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 2A1 of Rule 9, I rise to give notice of my intent to raise a question of the privileges of the House. Declaring the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives to be vacant. Resolved that the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives is hereby declared to be vacant.
A number of Democrats right now are saying the same thing, that they don't trust him.
The one thing we have in common is he's lied to all of us.
A handshake deal right now. If you were to move forward, if there were to be any kind of agreement, what would that look like, and what would you need to see from the Speaker at this point?
I think the die is cast based on the motion I just filed. I think the time for that discussion would have been over the last several weeks, but instead we saw the Speaker continuing to, the Speaker did not just fail to remediate the breach of the agreement he made with us in January, he accelerated the instances of breach. Like, after I laid out the breach, he went and violated the 72-hour rule. After I laid out the breach, he violated the $100 million no amendment suspension rule. So he seems to be reverting to the very unfortunate muscle memory of Washington, D.C. that has put our nation atop a $33 trillion debt that has led to $2 trillion annual deficits in our near future.
Ousited Speaker McCarthy insists that he has no regrets for choosing government over grievance. He says that he will not run again for Speaker.
Doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it is necessary. I don't regret standing up for choosing governance over grievance. It is my responsibility. It is my job. I do not regret negotiating. Our government is designed to find compromise. I don't regret my efforts to build coalitions and find solutions. I was raised to solve problems, not create them. So I may have lost a vote today, but as I walk out of this chamber, I feel fortunate to have served the American people. You need 218. Unfortunately, 4% of our conference can join all the Democrats and dictate who can be the Republican Speaker in this House. I don't think that rule is good for the institution, but apparently I'm the only one. I believe I can continue to fight, maybe in a different manner. I will not run for Speaker again. I'll have the conference pick somebody else.
Willens, a professor at Princeton University, says Kevin McCarthy's ouster from the position of Speaker is part of a coup d'etat by Donald Trump.
Well, it's the first time that a sitting speaker's ever been ousted, so it's unprecedented in that sense. There have been earlier moments in American history where there's been a great deal of trouble electing a speaker, particularly around the 1850s. There was a great deal of trouble there, and votes, finally getting people in the chair. It's a sign, I think, if history is any guide at all to this, it's a sign of a party in disintegration. That's what's happening, and it's melting down, and that's pretty clear. That's the older history. The more recent history, I think, is that what we're seeing today is the latest installment in the, ever continuing coup d'etat by Donald Trump. That's what we're seeing, and it's pretty clear that he's the hidden hand in a lot of this stuff that's been going on. That I think probably the The next step would be a shutdown, which is really what they're probably aiming for. They wanted to get McCarthy out of there in part because he stood in the way of that. Bunch of reasons, but that's part of it. And it's the politics of chaos. And I do think this is a triumph for Donald Trump. Anytime that you have the order being overthrown, I mean, he's managing to do now what he couldn't do in January 6th with his takeover of the House of Representatives, and doing it with his own people. You don't have to have crazy, shamans with crazy horns doing it. You can do it with Matt Gaetz. From the Freedom Caucus to the MAGA people, it's been the same thing, which is the hard right of the Republican Party has, overthrown in one way or another, one speaker after another, forced him to resign, as in the case of Boehner. This is the politics of cannibalism, which even Gingrich didn't like. They're eating their own, and the Republican Party a long time ago, really in the early 90s, decided that it was going to be able to take on this crazy kind of politics and be able to ride it to victory all of the time. And it would never catch up with them, but it caught up with them with Trump in a big way. My guess is that they'll try to find someone else who will command the respect of the entire Republican caucus and put it through, ram it through. But that's only the prelude. That will be only the prelude to what I think is their ultimate idea, which is to shut down the government and blame it on Biden. I'll try to blame it on Biden, and not even that. I mean, just shut it down. I mean, we're sort of at Batman politics here. I mean, this is kind of like the Joker. I mean, it's beyond anything that I'm capable of talking about, because I only talk about the past and history, and it's never been like this before. But there is a certain nihilistic quality to what they're doing. However, there's also genius in the madness, because the madness is about creating as much chaos as possible, and then then the Trump people will step in. McCarthy was in an impossible position, but in the end, he is going to, he does vaguely believe in the country, and he believes in politics up to a point, but then he wasn't going to go that far. At the very last minute over the weekend, he brokered the deal. Look, there are a lot of other reasons that are going on here that are personal as well as political. I mean, there's an ethics investigation of Matt Gaetz going on here about things that he was let off from in the courts, but the House Ethics Committee has a higher standard. I mean, he'd love to get rid of that, and getting rid of McCarthy may have been a way to do that as well. There's many, scenarios within scenarios going on here. If this is a prelude to shutdown, historically, shutdowns have not been very productive for the party that shuts down the Congress. I mean, this happened in the 90s, which is really the beginning of this history in some ways with Gingrich. And, the Republicans unleashed Gingrich thinking that he would do a good job against the Democrats, and then he decided to take the whole country down with him with two shutdowns that basically reelected Bill Clinton in 1996. So if you're going back on that precedent, if I was a Democrat, I'd say go ahead. The only problem is that we have to live with the effects of a government shutdown, which are very, very dire, and you don't want that to happen. You don't want to be the party that benefits from that, because everybody's going through a disaster, much worse now even than in the 90s.
Will Ensah from Princeton giving his thoughts on the going-ons in the House of Representatives in the U.S. Rufai.
Pure and simple, this is what happens to you when you keep giving appeasers meat and you hope they'll eat you last. Who popularized that quote? I think it was Winston Churchill. It said many years ago that appeaser is the person that gives the crocodile meat and hopes they'll eat him last. Prior to this time, McCarthy said all the right things. But because he wanted position, he started appeasing the Donald Trump base, the MAGA base. McCarthy was a House of Rep member that came up in the House to say that he totally condemns the January 6th incident, and President Trump should have taken responsibility. Then he was minority leader. When the race for who was going to be leader of the House started, the Speaker of the House, what did he do? He went ahead to start kowtowing to the likes of the Trumps of this world and other major MAGA movements people. The likes of the Matt Gaetz and other people out there. He did everything. In fact, he went to Mar-a-Lago to seek Trump's support. And they gave him the support on the condition that we are going to control you, one way or the other. So he knew what he was in for, because you remember the vote for who was going to be Speaker went on and on and on before they finally had a breakthrough. He knew what he was in for. And once he got in there, they started to control him. They wanted more cuts, like the cuts you're seeing on Ukraine. They wanted more budget cuts and the likes and all of that. And they pushed him. They pushed him to do everything in the book to favor them. In fact, they pushed him to start this impeachment, rigmarole now against President Biden. They pushed him to that. They pushed him to do all sorts. But the thing about appeasers, and that's why you must stand up tall for yourself, is that there is nothing you give them that is ever going to be enough. And in this case, nothing was enough for them. And when Trump was done with him, all he just needed to do was institute a coup in the House, push his people like Matt Gaetz, and before you know it, Speaker McCarthy was out. The last time this happened was in 1910 in America, in the case of Cannon, but that didn't fall through. But this was actually reality. And furthermore, because the people that ought to help him, he reneged against them. This was the same Speaker McCarthy that went on Sunday morning shows in America to berate the Democrats as regards passing the final bill, that prevented the government shutdown. He said, the Democrats were not ready to work with him. When in fact, it was the Democrats that pushed for that bill to be passed as a compromise bill. But what did he do? He berated them. Now he needed the Democrats. He couldn't get them. That's why they voted 216 to 210. So the Democrats were not ready to speak up for him because he berated them in the first place. So he got no support. The House now has to put in a pro-tem speaker of some sort, Patrick McHenry. Till they finally get somebody, the voting process will start. They wanted to shut the government down before, but what is happening now is that the House is shut down pretty much. And this debacle continues. Who are they going to have as the next speaker? Some of the Republicans have pushed Donald Trump forward because the American law does not say you have to be a member of the House of Reps before you can be a speaker. But we know that's a long shot now because of what Donald Trump is facing in his own regard. But the best candidates for the Speaker of the House will be an Hakeem Jeffries that is very bipartisan, although it will be a hard sell because he's Democrat and the Republicans have majority in the House. But Hakeem Jeffries is very bipartisan across board, and he had a good showing in the last speaker race. Time will tell. Lesson learned.
Okay, the Republicans have a 4-seat majority in the House of Representatives. And so that 4-seat majority, would they now be able to get their own person back onto that seat? Now, McCarthy lost out. You recall that when he was to emerge as a speaker in January, it took 14 rounds of voting before he finally emerged. And he had to make quite a number of compromises before he got there. And since then, the Republicans in the House have been divided right down the middle. And so he's a victim of that division within the Republican Party in the House of Representatives. And the fact also that those people who did not want him there in January are the ones who have been able to take him out this time around. Yes, in 1910, Speaker Cannon faced a similar situation, but he survived. But he became a very weak speaker. He's not one of those speakers of the U.S. House of Representatives that is remembered for having made much difference. But in this particular case, McCarthy's gavel has been taken away from him. And the Democrats, they had a meeting. They could have saved him if they wanted to. But the resolution at the meeting they had was that, look, allow the Republicans to do what they like with their person. And hence, he lost his gavel. But even the people who removed him, who voted against him in an unusual fashion, each one of them standing up and voting, which is not the ordinary procedure for the removal of a Speaker of the House of Representatives, even if it is unprecedented, because this is the first time it will happen that the Speaker of the House of Representatives of the United States will be removed. His gavel will be taken away from him. So they are also confused. There is no clear favorite. Then nobody has any idea who is going to be next. And this confusion, if you like, call it chaos, is coming at a time when they have just about 40 days to prevent a government shutdown. So the drama in the U.S. House of Representatives now will be getting a new speaker and also making sure, that government is not shut down. Well, what should be noted is that Kevin McCarthy says he's not going to run. I mean, if he wants to run again to test his luck, he can. But he says he's no longer interested. Okay, so that's the situation right now. I don't think that the Speaker, the North Carolina Speaker, McHenry, who has been put there as interim Speaker, he himself has not expressed any kind of interest. But what you see here is just politics. Just as we play politics here in Nigeria, they play politics also elsewhere. It's just the nature of it that is different. Just as there is division in the House of Reps in the United States, they face a similar division in the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom, where Suella Braverman yesterday, almost stole the show at the Conservative Party conference, indicating that there's also division. So politicians will always be politicians, whether it's in the UK or in the United States or here in Nigeria. But it's interesting to see that process playing out, and Kevin McCarthy losing his gavel. But he has not lost his seat. He remains a member of the House of Representatives.
Yes, well, just 9 months in, he has made history as the first Speaker in the U.S. House of Representatives to be ousted. And again, I think what's even more significant is that it's coming from his own party, also reflecting the state of the party in the House. And one of the things I must mention is that with the temporary Speaker, who is actually an ally of McCarthy himself, that's Patrick McHenry, his powers are limited, so barely administrative. He only will be able to recess the House, adjourn the chamber, and recognize Speaker nominations. And so he's going to midwife the process through which the next Speaker of the House will be elected. Now, they've said that they're looking at next week, a date next week. Some people are proposing the 11th of October as a date because, again, because this has never happened, they are charting on, they are on territories that they haven't yet, gone through. So it's really quite interesting, even in American politics, and a number of things to watch, because again, it might very well set precedents in terms of how these issues are handled. It's important to note that the reason why Patrick McHenry emerged as temporary Speaker or interim Speaker was because, as part of the House rules in the House of Representatives in the US, the Speaker would nominate some members of his party who would, in the event that he would not be in office, take over. And the first in line is Patrick McHenry, who stood up for him when some far-right, far-right members had kicked against or opposed his nomination as Speaker 9 months ago. Now, moving forward, in terms of some names that have been thrown up, Matt Gaetz had alluded or mentioned the second in command, second highest office holder in the House, in the party, and that is the person of Stephen Scalise. Interestingly, Stephen Scalise had announced a few months back that he was battling blood cancer, but that he was fine, he was detected early, and that he could still carry on. He's now said that in different circles to have thrown in his hat in the ring to be Speaker of the House, and also showing that his health wouldn't be a challenge. Again, Matt Gaetz has also, alluded to the fact that him being, having that condition should not stop him. He's more credible a candidate than McCarthy is, and he will be backing him as well for Speaker. There are a few other names have been thrown up. Of course, nothing concrete yet, because of course it's still too early, and it's novel in American political history in terms of a Speaker being removed and what then happens the days afterwards. The challenge here has already been established is that it would slow down processes. The passage of some important bills in the House, some have complained, have talked about the fact that it wouldn't happen in the next few days because McHenry's powers are limited. Also, McHenry has already started work. He had asked former Speaker Nancy Pelosi to vacate her office, office complex, saying that it would be needed for the next Speaker to use. And again, this is not making him very popular, as she had mentioned that during her own time, she had ensured that the previous Speaker had enjoyed the use of offices and just that respect and the like. So a few things going on, showing perhaps very significantly the division from the far right, the moderate, and those who are just in between. We're going to see how this will pan out in the next few days. Again, it's breaking news breaking news from yesterday into this morning, and to see who might very well emerge as Speaker, and if it would strengthen, as was purported by Mr. Williams there, Donald Trump's power in the House, and what it would, the impact of that on his presidential ambitions, his nomination by the party to be candidate and then hope perhaps emerge as president in next year's US elections. Move on to our next story.